OP12 just had 3 huge regionals this weekend, and the meta is already shifting fast. I'm Darkshow TCG, and today we're going to be breaking down everything you need to know from week 2 of the OP12 format. First, we're going to look at the top 32 regionals from the Toronto regional. As you see here, we have about 7 UP Luffys, 6 Green Zoros, 6 Bonnie, 3 Rayleigh, 2 GP, 2 Shanks, 2 Enel, 1 Lucci, 1 Calgara, 1 Green Purple Lim, and 1 Yellow Kid. We're sort of following the same trend that we had last week, in which every color here is represented, mainly green and red, but once again, no monocolor purple leaders and no monocolor blue leaders this time actually in this top 32. If we drill on down to top 16, we can see that there are still 4 UP Luffys, 4 Zoros, 3 Bonnies, 2 Rayleighs, all 2 of the Shanks converted, as well as the single Lucci converted into this top 16. This data is telling me that UP Luffy is able to stand toe-to-toe with the other predicted format giants being Zoro, Bonnie, and Rayleigh. Unfortunately for UP, Bonnie did end up taking the event for Toronto, and it ended up as a finals between Green Bonnie and Green Zoro, with once again Bonnie taking it in the end. This data is actually not that surprising. With the results from this tournament, Bonnie has now picked up her 3rd win of the format, so I think it's fair to say that she is definitely one of the best decks in the room, if not the best deck in the room. However, Blue Purple Luffy's Uprising may be able to contest with that had the bracket been a little different, or rather the top cut been a little different. Lucci still making his way into the top cut doesn't surprise me, because he still is just a generic black leader who has access to a lot of good tools and is able to retrieve them with cards like Rebecca and Mancherry, which help him go into his trash and almost use it as a second hand. Shanks converting into top 16. You know me, I'm a Shanks hater. However, this does sort of attest that the deck still has legs and it still can compete with the rest of them. Shanks is another leader with a good generic leader ability. However, the only issue, or the primary issue behind that deck, is the deck's lack of consistency. Sometimes you would play games on Shanks in which you would draw all of your top end and no counter, or you would draw all of your counter and no top end. So you would have very, I would say, varianced games on that leader, or at least I would. And that is also a common complaint of Shanks players, is that they would just not see what they needed to see in time. And Shanks definitely is a deck in which a lot of his more powerful removal tools aren't really cohesive with like his package, his red-haired pirate package, or his engine. Rayleigh, last week I predicted that he was like the second best, if not the best deck in the room. He is still showing up in top cut. However, he is less represented than the other 3 leaders, that being UP, Zoro, and Bonnie. I still think Rayleigh is the aggro deck of the format. He is able to rush down the UP Luffy as well as Zoro. Madrid has 11 different leaders in their top 16. And one of the more surprising results is being that the leader with the most top 16s in that tournament was Blue Purple Sanji. It seems that Blue Purple Straw Hat leaders are back. We have 3 Blue Purple Sanjis, 2 Blue Purple Luffys, 2 Shanks, 2 Zoros, 1 Rayleigh, 1 Bonnie, 1 Teach, 1 GP Luffy, 1 Blue Kuzan, 1 Enel, and 1 Blue Purple Reiju. And now showing up again in top cut, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think the deck actually has some legs. I'm not going to say it's a tier 1 or a tier 2 competitor, but it is definitely a deck that can, as you see, has converted, 2 weeks in a row. So I definitely wouldn't look down on this deck. Me and a friend of mine were talking about Reiju recently, and we were saying, like, what are her bad matchups in this format? We have yet to test them, but Reiju has always been just like another aggro deck that can eke out wins or just overwhelm their opponent depend if they see the right early game. One thing to note about Reiju is that she should have a really good Rayleigh matchup, because her 5-cost Niji can either bounce the 4-drop Luffy or KO one of the 1-costs, and then Reiju is not a leader to play a lot of bricks, meaning she can counter most of the lower swings that Rayleigh is dealing with, as well as her board is almost infinite. It can keep replenishing itself from trash provided Reiju sees her pieces. And Reiju is not a deck that can suffer from inconsistency, provided, she finds stage early on or her searchers. Green Purple Luffy, it's another deck that I'm happy to see convert. It's one of my favorite decks to play. However, this meta just doesn't favor Green Purple Luffy as much, seeing that he has bad matchups in Bonnie, Rayleigh, Green Zoro. He's pretty even slash ahead against a Blue Purple Luffy. I think he should still be fine against Shanks. The control version of Shanks never really had a definitive overwhelming win rate against the Green Purple Luffy deck. And I think maybe the Green Purple Luffy deck should be decent into Kuzan. However, once Kuzan gets those 8s on board, it can be pretty difficult for almost any deck to deal with. Speaking of Kuzan, Blue Kuzan was actually the winner of the event today in Madrid. Very surprising that this leader was able to get the win. However, I did see a tweet that Kuzan's top 32 bracket did look favorable for him, so it's not too surprising that he was able to get the win. Honestly, this Blue Purple Sanji deck is really fun to play. Once again, I'm glad to see it up here. It's one of my favorite decks of the format as like my pet deck. I think this top 16 distribution from Madrid is a good indicator of how robust and wide our format can be. Our last top 16 chart of today is going to be from the Kissimee offline regional. We can see that UP Luffy ended up taking 5 tops, Rayleigh ended up taking 4, Bonnie with 3, Green Zoro with 1, Teach with 1, Sakazuki with 1, and Purple Luffy with 1 as well. So we have another new leader entering Top Cut this week, and it is Purple Luffy. When the Blue Purple Luffy strategy got hit with the paired bands in 9-cost Linlin and 8-cost Katakuri, I immediately thought that, well, Purple Luffy should be better now because he can play the broken Big Mom Pirates purple cards that Blue Purple Luffy cannot, and I'm glad to see that pay off here. Shout out to the Purple Luffy player that was able to make this top 16. Personally, I think the deck is still pretty okay. Unfortunately, it doesn't have too many good matchups, especially if you're going like a more ramp build of the deck as opposed to a tempo build of the deck, meaning you're not really playing your Luffy Taros and your Son Girls and your Zorojuros. This version of the deck may not be able to stand up to Teach, Bonnie, and Rayleigh, as well as the previous tempo version would have been able to stand up to Teach, but Bonnie and Rayleigh just seemed unfavorable about this Purple Luffy leader in general. Sakazuki is a welcome surprise in returning to Top Cut. I'm glad to see this leader converting. I still don't think they're super top of meta, but I'm happy that Sakazuki players are able to convert. Blue removal has always been some of the strongest in the game, and combining that with Black's cost reduction is one of the things that made Sakazuki as powerful as it was in its prime. So once again, I am glad to see this leader still topping. Next up is Blackbeard. I am not surprised to see Blackbeard topping so consistently. I really enjoy the deck, and I think it has all the tools it needs to be able to compete against the format. It is unfavored into Zoro, and it's 50-50 into Rayleigh, but it having such a positive Bonnie matchup, I think it deserves its inclusion here. In Kissimee, Green Zoro actually underperformed for how popular I think the deck is and for how strong I think it is. One of the reasons I think that Green Zoro is underperformed is the overwhelming presence of Rayleigh and just how one-sided that matchup can feel sometimes. 1-cost Buggy is an insanely powerful card against the Green Zoro leader, as well as the Conqueror's Hockey events in Rayleigh that just messes up all of your combat math when playing Green Zoro. And Green Zoro is a deck in which you do a lot of combat math. The deck is deceptively tricky with how you can choose to play your later turns, and you must be efficient with your Dawn if you seek to try and kill Silver's Rayleigh as Green Zoro. Jewelry Bonnie showing up with the 3rd highest placements in Top Cut in Kissimee. Not surprised. I think she's, like, honestly, if not the best deck, the 2nd best deck in a room, and it's super close as to how close she is to being best deck in a room. Silver's Rayleigh, the aggro deck of the format. Nothing much more I can say that hasn't already been said. He has a positive matchup into UP Luffy, which has actually overperformed, or rather exceeded my expectations this weekend. Blue Purple Luffy, the Demon King is back. I think in all 3 events that I've covered today, outside of Madrid, he has had the most presence in Top Cut conversion. I think after seeing the results from week 1, a lot of players decided to pick this deck back up, or they never stopped testing it and took it back into the field, and the results are really showing. So if we total up all of the tops from this weekend, top 32s as well as top 16s, we get to see this distribution here. with, once again, UP Luffy taking the most amounts of conversions to top cut this weekend. Next is Jewelry Bonnie with 10, Green Zoro with 9, Rayleigh with 8, Shanks with 4, and then the rest you can see below. Compared to week 1's results, the top 5 decks have drastically changed. Green Zoro has moved down to 3rd place from 1st. Blue Purple Luffy has moved up to 1st place from 5th. Bonnie has moved up from 3rd place to 2nd, and Rayleigh has fell from grace from 2nd place to 4th. And Teach has completely fallen out of the top 5. I will say that you can take this data with a grain of salt because week 1 had 5 tournaments compared to 3 tournaments, so the results can seem a little skewed. However, we will be looking at the total amount of tops from the past 2 weeks towards the end of this video. I just wanted to note the change in the rankings and do a little bit of comparative analysis between this data. And as we can see, it is looking like Blue Purple Luffy is officially back, but now it is on more of a clock because it can't constantly heal while removing. It can just remove or push tempo with its leader ability. The deck still does chain giants, it still does spam counter events, and has a large hand from the effect of drawing 2 cards a turn, but it isn't exacerbated by healing life while removing a character or having a untapping, aggressive, and defensive blocker. I think the Blue Purple Luffy deck is still a strong deck, and many others would agree, seeing as it converted the most this weekend. Now we're going to take a look at the combined total of tops from these past 2 weeks. Green Zoro is still number 1 in the amount of tops. However, it is now tied with Blue Purple Luffy in the amount of wins. And Blue Purple Luffy has made a staggering jump from 5th to 2nd place in the amount of tops. Bonnie is still 3rd, staying consistent. Rayleigh has dropped down from 2nd place to 4th place. Teach has dropped from 4th to 5th. And then the rest you can see below. All the while, Bonnie has managed to squeeze out another win. She's consistently won events 2 weeks in a row, and hopefully she can keep this up towards the end of the format. Today we're going to do a little bit of a live session and adjust things based on the data from the combined results of week 2 and week 1, just for our overall OP12 meta tier list. By the end of the format, this thing is going to probably look completely different. I don't know, maybe Vegapunk goes here at the top. But right now, we're just going to adjust it purely by the numbers as well as some criteria. I'm going to consider tier 1 decks that are consistently converting and representing well into top cut as well as winning events. So if you have a win and you're taking up about 25% of top cut, I consider you a tier 1 deck. Meaning Zoro has a win, he's been converting. Bonnie has a win, she's been converting. Rayleigh has a win, he's been converting. And now we're adding to tier 1 Blue Purple Luffy. He now has a win and he is converting really well into top cut. While Teach doesn't have a win, he still has 10 tops. He still is within the top 5 leaders. However, I don't think he's tier 1 because he has yet to have that win. He also does not have that many conversions, or he isn't super represented in the top cut conversions. Same with Green Purple Luffy. And to an extent, Shanks is also up there. Him having only 1 less top than Green Purple Luffy as well as Marshall D. Teach. I will say it is no coincidence that Kuzan has been topping 2 weeks in a row as well as being able to convert into a win. That being said, I think this deserves to move him up from tier 2 to tier 1.5. Being able to compete with some of the decks in tier 1 and even earning a win earns him this spot in tier 1.5. Now we have our graduation ceremony from our rogue decks into tier 2. These decks going into tier 2 are decks that have consistently topped over these past 2 weeks and have a modest amount of tops overall. For graduations, we're going to do Blue Purple Sanji, Blue Black Sakazuki, Yellow Enel, and Mono Black Rob Lucci. Congratulations to our tier 2 graduates. I wish you success in your future. Next up, we have new additions to the class of Rogue. These are leaders that have obtained their first top in the format, and we'll be expecting great things from them. First is Mono Purple Luffy. Next is Yellow Kid, Blue Purple Reiju, Green Yellow Lim. Congratulations on our new entrance to the OP12 class. We'll be expecting great things from you in the future. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the final tier list for our week 2 OP12 meta breakdown. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please let me know what you guys think is the most interesting top of the weekend in the comments down below. You guys have a good one, y'all. Peace.